The Creatives with AI podcast.
Welcome to the Creatives AI podcast. I'm your host, David, and I got something a bit different for you today that's already turning out to be a bit controversial, so I'm interested to see what you think in the comments. In today's show, I talked to Simon Fothergill, a computer science PhD from Cambridge University, about the use of artificial intelligence in mental health care, particularly as an early intervention tool for those at risk of self-harm and suicidality. We also touch on privacy and security in AI and the regulation of AI in medical devices. It's really interesting and one not to miss. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this in-depth conversation with Simon.
The Creatives with AI podcast, the spiritual home of creatives curious about AI and its role in their future.
Okay, Simon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
How's everything going these days? I know we were supposed to do this last week, but we didn't get a chance to. Is you feeling better and fighting fit today?
Yes, I think so. Got over Freshers' Flu. We went to Cambridge University Freshers' Fair to recruit lots of participants for our data collection, so might have caught something there. But yeah, back in business now.
I've actually done that before myself as well with the company I used to work for. We did the Freshers' Fair, and then there's a job fair, I think, as well, kind of later in the year. That's like chaos. But it was quite good fun though. So yeah, I can totally empathize. Right. So I was referred to you guys from a friend of mine who actually works in the startup ecosystem in Cambridge. And I thought what was really interesting about what you guys are doing is that you're using AI to, and I'm going to say this and then I expect you to correct me and sort of tell me what you actually do later. But you guys are using AI tools to support particularly young people who might have challenges with mental health or have some issues and things that they want to maybe talk to people about that they're not comfortable about. So I think that that's an issue that touches everyone, regardless of whether you're young or old. And not particularly, but I think, my audience is mainly creatives. And I think, we're generally a sensitive bunch as well. So it probably is relevant to everyone. But maybe if you start off by just giving everybody a little bit of background of your personal background so we can kind of understand where you're coming from, and then we can just get into the discussion from there. Yeah,
sure. So I've had a very privileged education, went to a very rounded school. And then I've done a couple of degrees in computer science and engineering. And then I've basically stayed around Cambridge working for various startups of various sizes and stages in the field of AI as a software engineer, machine learning engineer, AI engineer. And my PhD was very inter and intradisciplinary. So it was looking at sports science and machine learning, not just alongside each other, but sort of like interlinked. And I've always been sort of on that more applied side of machine learning. And so that sort of, set me up through working in natural language processing quite a lot to be where I am now.
Interesting. I'm going to take us off track straight away. So is that like the Moneyball type stuff that you were doing, sort of analyzing sport performance and using AI and machine learning for that?
So I was trying to build a rowing coach that could evaluate indoor rowing technique in the same way that a human did. So not just like saying, please move your hands 2 millimeters higher at 24 seconds through the race, because no one can do that, but to be more like have a relax at the front of your stroke or something like that. So a bit more sort of like human-y feedback.
Interesting. That's really cool. Okay. we already, I'm not going to go down that road because we could have a whole podcast about that if we wanted to.
Yes, but it's actually very similar to what I'm doing now, which is where it's not rowing coaches who are the experts, but it is mental health therapists who are the experts. Apart from that difference, is basically exactly the same. We're collecting data from people in very sensitive situations, building machine models to replicate and explore those sorts of qualitative human judgments.
What inspired you to sort of try and use AI for mental health?
So I love building things, and I love the magic of machines. Yeah, and AI is particularly sort of good window to look through that magic of machines, I think. So why apply it to mental health is then the question. And I think it's because it's a really good way of helping people, basically. Yeah, it's and it's good that we think of health and going to the gym not just in physical terms.
Maybe if you start off by describing what it is that you guys do, and then we can maybe get into it a little bit more from that, because I think that would probably help to set the scene as well.
Right, yes. So we are doing conversational AI for mental health support. So we are basically trying to address the problem that there is a really long waiting list for mental health care. And if you can automate the provision of it, then that solves that problem. So automating that provision makes the whole business of healthcare provision more efficient. So that is a good thing. But also providing it through a chatbot can also have advantages as well. So we're doing conversational AI for mental health support. So there are people out there. Adolescents is our focus group for various reasons, which we can come back to later as well. We were sort of inspired by stories our CEO, who is a professional psychotherapist for 20 years, tells us like when a 16-year-old girl comes into his clinic thinking about, in quite a bad state, thinking about self-harm and suicidality issues. Then what he realizes after talking to her for a bit is that the issues started like 3 years before, when she came home from school one afternoon and had a bad day and was a bit miserable, and like someone had mentioned something to her in the playground, and she started Googling self-harm. That is when things started to go wrong. If we can not even make it so there's not even a waiting list, because people don't get so ill that they need to wait for therapy, because we can get in early and have an early intervention, and then we've really helped solve the problem. And there's not really any way of doing that unless it is in an automated way. You can't have every member of the NHS psychotherapy staff in every teenager's bedroom just in case they start blogging things. But you can have social media platforms who don't want to take any responsibility for this sell their data or provide their data to companies that will provide that service. And so things like Meta can have a stamp. So we kind of like want to be like the St. John's ambulance of the metaverse. So, if you go to a theatre, there's always St. John's ambulance on the side. And so then you'll be happy to go to that theatre in case you collapse or something. So it's the same with the metaverse. If you want to scroll through a platform, then that platform wants to have someone on hand in case you start scrolling through the wrong things. So yes, we can only provide that in an automatic way. So yeah, we want to provide this service of mental health support, and we want to do it in an automated way because of efficiency, because that's the only way you can do early intervention, and also because some people actually quite like the non-judgmental aspects of talking to a camera, where there is no human judgment. There's no human analysis, but there is no human judgment, as in there's no assigning of value to the client, the person using the service, by some human that they could be anxious about. That doesn't mean that there is not human-like analysis going on, but there's not that judgment idea behind it as well, and also you don't have to look a human or an anthropomorphized something. You don't have to look at them in the eye. So it can be quite a good medium, and obviously it's always available even when you're like in bed at 3 a.m. and stuff like that. So yes, so we want to provide this sort of healthcare support through this digital intervention. based around one-to-one therapy sessions. So that there are other ways of providing mental health support through AI even. Some people just try to ingest the whole of the NHS website around mental health and do a question answering system around that. That's great, one way of doing it, and we might want to incorporate that sort of things. But our main focus is around providing that one-to-one therapy session. And we want to do it around... to begin with, we're just focusing on a few concerns within generalized anxiety, because that's a really common thing to do. Common issue that comes up. And we're focusing on adolescents, which I know this was a question. I'm just answering all your questions now without you.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Go ahead. I have plenty more.
But the reason that we're focusing on adolescents is because it's a good point it's a helpful point in people's lives to provide that care. But it was also a statistic. So actually, I will look this up because I did find a statistic about it. But so the ONS in 2021 says those aged 16 to 29 years were most likely to have some form of anxiety, and this decreased steadily through the age groups until at 70, it's like 5% likely, but at 16 to 29, it's like 30% likely. So there are statistics as well that suggest it's a good population to focus on.
And I imagine there's big crossover in that population as well with people who are more familiar using technology. I know I mentioned to you beforehand, and I said I did specifically because I mentioned that you were coming on, and I had a lot of, I talked to a lot of people and said, did they have any questions? And the main point of pushback kind of that I got was, they couldn't imagine talking to a machine, and that would make them actually feel worse, that they would think, oh, well, nobody will talk to me. I have to talk to a computer. But I think most of the people that I asked were over the age of 40, right? So I think there's a huge difference in, how people interact at different ages. Are you finding that maybe that's also part of that, as well as not only do people of that age have a lot of anxiety, but they're also much more comfortable interacting online. And in fact, they're probably more comfortable interacting in a non-face-to-face way than in an actual with a real person.
Yes. I'm sure that's true. And we have definitely seen it in terms of the channels that we use to advertise. So we will advertise for participants for who we would like to volunteer to be part of the community, but we are doing that through we will do it through ads on Facebook, but Instagram is the channel to use. Apparently, I didn't know this.
It's good for short videos and reels and things like that. So yeah, I could see where you could, you might be able to create some short, reels that could kind of show an interaction, which could be interesting.
Yes, but is you just have to sort of look around to see that sort of that trend that you've described. I've seen children trying to order stuff on Amazon as just completely naturally, as that's how you get stuff. So I think that's definitely another reason for providing the service in that way. Yes. And
was the main? I mean, you mentioned earlier that one of the psychologists that founded the company obviously has a clinical practice, and he was seeing, teenagers coming in that way. Was that the reason that he decided to focus on sort of adolescents and young people, or was it something else, or was that just the reason because it was his experience that they were the ones that were kind of suffering the most?
That's certainly a very inspirational story for all of us. I mean, you have to get him on next time to ask him. But,
don't worry.
Yes, he would say that it's the younger age that has so much need for psychology and psychiatric help, and those statistics talk to that as well. And I think he sees that in his industry.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of the engineering bit a little bit, because that's your background, and I think it's probably going to be quite interesting to understand how this stuff hangs together. I guess my first question is did you build your own tool, and have you built your own sort of models to do this, or are you using the basis of a model that's out in the market? So, did you say take something like a ChatGPT and use that as the basis and then train on top of it, or did you go out and create something entirely new? And how does one go about doing that in this particular environment? I think is, specifically, like, how do you go out and do that responsibly, when you've got such a kind of sensitive topic that you're talking about? Where do you get that data? How does that work?
Yeah, okay, lots of questions there. We're not using ChatGPT because that would be terribly irresponsible, because we're not in control of what it would say. And even if we, and also because we can't explain why it says what it says. Yeah, so that would be a big no. However, we are a research institution, organization, company, and we of course want to stand on the shoulders of giants and take into account all of the amazing research and developments that have been going on in natural language processing recently. So we do that in the design of our systems and models. For example, we are using large language models, transformer-based large language models that do capture that structure within language and take into account, analyze words in the context of other words. So using that attention mechanism that is fundamental to the transformer-based large language models, which is really powerful. And when you have models as large as we have, as many parameters as we have, and you put enough training data through them, or other people put enough training data through them, then, and they're published in the public domain, that is a really useful resource for all natural language processing engineers. So we want to use that, but it's a component that we use, and we are totally in control of how we use it and what data we put through to fine tune it. And most importantly, we're totally in control of the data which we use to evaluate it. So it does form one part of the bigger system that we are able to explain. We wouldn't never want to hand over control of what is generated as text, for example, to a company like OpenAI, because we are not in control of it, and we can't explain why it says what it says. So that's just a terrible idea.
Yeah, I imagine that'll make a lot of people very comfortable to hear that. And we won't go down the road of describing what a transformer model is. I think I'm going to do a short series, and maybe 8 or 10 minute little sections on each technology and what that technology is and how it works and stuff like that. So for people listening who don't understand what that means, I am going to put together some short podcasts to maybe try and explain that a little bit better as well.
But basically, these large language models, they have so many sort of parameters that they can basically look at a structure of a piece of text and allow you to, for example, classify it according to a certain sort of taxonomy of classes that you might have. So for example, for us, we're interested in the client's mental state, and can we predict that through what they say? And so there's some sort of mapping that we're wanting between what a client might type in to the chatbot and the understanding that we want to store within our algorithms. There's a mapping there. And because these large language models have so many parameters, so many moving parts, so many levers, it's actually possible to establish and get it to recognize this mapping. Because it's so big and complicated, it can do that. But we are in control of what that mapping is. We've got a power drill, a really clever, powerful tool to do that. But we are in charge of where the holes go. Okay.
Right. Got you. That makes sense. So when you're obviously all of this information is highly sensitive. I'm sure people and users who come on the system don't really want anybody to know. How does an AI company, not you guys specifically, but looking at it from the way the models work and stuff like that, like what's best practice to protect people's privacy across the board? It could be mental health information, it could be normal health information, it could be anything. Are there certain techniques and things that companies and like OpenAI and these other AI tools should use to kind of make sure that they protect that information?
Yes. So in terms of security of the data, so keeping it safe so that the people who shouldn't have access to it don't have access to it, there are various tools and techniques that you can use to achieve that. Basically, you've got to lock it down. And you've got to sort of minimize the amount of stuff that you need to lock down as well, I guess. And then you've got to lock it down. Ways of achieving authentication and access control. So systems need to know that the person who's trying to interact with it is the person that is trying to interact with it. And then secondly, the system needs to know if they are that person, are they allowed to have access to these things?
Right.
And so there's two issues there. So you can set up policies to make sure that people only have access to the right things, and you can achieve the protection through, I would say, not just passwords but multi-factor authentication. So you can only prove that you are yourself. And like when you log into a bank, you don't just give a password. You have to. It comes up on your phone as well, and you have to have a biometric, or you have to have another password, or a one-time thing that's only lasts for a while. So you have to have that multi-factor level of authentication, I think, is important. And also try to minimize the number of passwords that are being passed around. So there's this thing called identity federation. So there are certain services that will take care of the password side of things and the multi-factor authentication side of things, and be trusted. And so as long as you as the person with doing the interesting thing trusts this identity provider, then the identity provider can take care of the authentication and then just give some sort of like token, it's called, to the person doing the things, to say, yes, this person is the person that they say they are, and so now you decide what they can access.
Right. So there's the whole cybersecurity side where you've got to make sure that only certain people can access the information.
Yes. And
then you've got the anonymity side, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I assume you would want the users that use the platform, I assume in the big, if somebody just, picks up something from somebody says on X or Facebook, and then maybe it flags a message to say, hey, would you like to get some support? And somebody comes over and starts talking to the bot, that would just be an anonymous conversation, right?
Yes, it could be. It depends how we are going to, in terms of what CamAI are doing. We have various avenues of commercialization and providing this service to people. It could be philanthropic, it could be selling it to governments, could be selling it to the social media platforms. So it all depends. But in general, if someone is trying to use an AI service and they're giving that service data, then sometimes they do have to identify themselves to that company so that company knows what data belongs to who, so that they can delete it if it needs to be deleted because the user wants it deleted. He doesn't want it anymore. So some sort of identity provision has to be established. But there are lots of aspects of data that people give to AI systems where actually the actual identity of the person where it comes from isn't important. Lots of other things about that person are important. Lots of metadata to which goes into the provenance of data, which is a big topic we can talk about later, but are important. But actually the personal identifiable information bits, quite a lot of that isn't necessary. Like you can still build a model that provides healthcare to 16-year-old girls without knowing their names are Jane and Mary. So all of that stuff can be anonymized, and by anonymizing we mean not allowing people who shouldn't see it to see it.
I think that's a good point. And I come from a digital marketing background, and I just want to build on that because that's how a lot of the web targeting works as well. I know they talk about cookie IDs and, people get really wound up over cookies, but at the end of the day, a cookie ID is a number in a database. If anybody ever looked at that, they'd have no idea who you are. They don't know your name. They don't know where you live. They don't know anything about you. They might know some metadata, like we said, so some general information about, a location that you're in, the type of device that you use, what sort of software you have, and they can make some assumptions using statistical analysis to figure out, what buckets you fit into, and then they can use those buckets to then target advertising to you. And I think what you're describing is essentially the same thing. It's, somebody can come in, you can use the metadata about it. You don't need, like you said, you don't need to know that it's Mary. You just need to know that it's a female or someone who identifies as female and they're a young adult, whatever, and they're in a particular area. It could be a city. It doesn't have to be like, we know what house you're in. It's just, we know what city you're in, because people in a certain city or a certain geographic region will have similar types of concerns potentially. Like, it's very different if you live somewhere that, if you're on a Caribbean island, you're going to have very different concerns than if you live in Finland. It's a whole different thing. So, winter and summer are going to be different. In the Caribbean, you've got hurricane season, so you get really anxious because you worry about the weather, where you don't have that in Finland. So I guess I'm trying to sort of support what you're saying by just adding another example for people so that they can, kind of understand that when people in these businesses talk about personally identifiable data and we talk about being anonymous, I think that anonymity piece is more about you individually as an individual person. And I'm just trying to sort of support you there, just saying, yes, we might know a lot about people, but we don't actually know, your specific name, unless you link it to an account and you specifically want it tied to you as a person. Now, I have a question for you in general, and this relates more to like the ChatGPT and the tools that are free online. And I don't know if you can answer it or not, but it maybe you can. But if I sign up to pay for ChatGPT so that I can get access to GPT-4, I assume, and I could be totally wrong, and again, I don't know if you know the answer, but I assume that all that's doing, the only validation and verification that they're doing and what I'm paying for and creating that account is just so that they can manage access to the tool. They don't, from that point forward, like GPT-4 doesn't care who I am. It cares about what I put in as prompts and the answers that I give, and is it good or not, and do I say yes or no? But from that perspective, it doesn't actually care who I am as an individual. That only matters for them for access to the platform. So that's all they care about. Am I David Brown? Whatever. Can I get access to GPT-4 or can I not? Because I pay for it or not. But the system, obviously there's some random ID, and I have an ID every time I have a conversation, and that conversation will have a thread, and that thread will be tied to some random ID, but it probably creates a new ID every single time I come in. Or do you think do you think it carries over the same ID? Or do you know? Sorry, I know that's a slightly unfair, massive question, but
I think you're probably better off talking to OpenAI tech support, or not, perhaps. But
I want Sam Altman. Sam Altman, if you're out there, come on. You're on Joe Rogan. I promise I won't take that much time.
But if you log into a website with a username and a password, then that's all of the information that you're explicitly providing, and that will tie to an account that will track all of the activities that are done under that authenticated user. And yeah, probably every time you log in, that it keeps record. I know, like Dali remembers all the pictures it's created for me in the past and stuff. So, yes, that's all you're giving it. It's just username. You could make up use a random email address and different and whatever password, and that would be your account. And unless it asks you for any other information, you're not giving it explicitly. But then browsers can look at cookies and things and find out where you've been on other websites, and it might do that. It seems to be very surprising what Facebook can advertise to you.
It's the way the Facebook things work is I don't know if we want to go down this whole rabbit hole at the minute, but the way that the Facebook sort of pixels work is pretty incredible. They create shadow profiles of everybody. So even if you've never logged into Facebook or created an account, they still have a profile for you, because any website that has one of those little, share on Facebook buttons or anything like that, that all places a Facebook cookie ID on your computer, and then it links they can see you everywhere you go around the web, and they use that to build a profile. So if you do go and just create a Facebook account, the very first time you log in, they could literally target you with exact targeted advertising. They know who your friends like. It's pretty creepy how it all works. I was sort of hoping, I guess what I was getting at in my question, and again, this is just from me sort of assuming how these tools work, but kind of, I just assume that you've got this massive, this thing, this model that runs that's like ChatGPT, right? And it's kind of separated from the business part of it. So the business is doing this is David Brown and he has a license to access the tool. But once I start accessing the tool, it doesn't know that I'm linked to that account specifically. I'm just going into the massive model of the other tens of millions of people who are using it. And like we said, it might use a cookie ID so that it can keep a thread of my conversations. But from that perspective, it doesn't really kind of care.
That's an important aspect of acting as a responsible AI company, I guess. Yes, is what do you do with the PII data? Yeah, do you put it into your models or not? I think the insurance industry has a tricky issue with that, and all these things come up through the auditing, when you adhere to the regulations around AI, which are evolving and have evolved to a greater or lesser extent in different industries. But I think the argument within the insurance industry is that you let's say computer science degree holders are statistically more likely to crash their cars than English literature graduates, for example. Is that a fact that actually is important to take into account so the insurance industry can survive, or is that just a really rude bias? No,
it's a good question.
Lots of decisions are a bit tricky. And also on the anonymity thing, anonymity is not a binary thing either. And so, it's a tricky decision as to how to balance that. And I think that's why it's important, and you're being a responsible AI company, to be transparent about what you're doing. I think being a responsible AI company is about being authentic and transparent and secure. So with the cybersecurity and the confidentiality and the anonymizing of things, we've talked about those things, but it's also about being transparent, and it's also about being authentic. So transparency is, yes, being clear about how you do use your data. Yeah, which bits of data are going into the models, which bits are just left on the side, like the names, and so. Yeah, so in our case, we do have PII data because we do need to delete stuff if people want it deleted, but that is only accessible by the gatekeepers. It's not accessible by the model developers, for example. Maybe you have to be transparent about those sorts of things. But you also have to be transparent about the data that isn't PII data, the metadata, as you said, do you live in the Caribbean or in London? And all of these bits of metadata are really important because they allow us to personalize the AI service, basically. And if you train a chatbot on therapy conversations from 13-year-old boys and then try and get it to give therapy to a 16-year-old girl, it's not going to really work. So they talk in a different way. That's just a silly example, but good responsible AI practice is to identify those pieces of metadata, those ways that data set can be biased, which is of concern to the people who are ultimately using that data set. So for example, we're doing studies where we interview those people to ask them, what does it mean to be someone? What characteristics about a therapist are important to you? How would you not want to be biased or treated unfairly? What do you think might make you be treated unfairly or biased? Everyone should do studies into that to identify the metadata, which is important, to identify the ways that a data set will be biased, because all data sets are biased. But the question is, in what way? And it's actually quite useful for data sets to be biased in some ways, so that you can get that personalization. But you need to be transparent about how it is biased. Otherwise, people will be concerned that it is biased. So to alleviate the concerns, you have to be transparent about that. You have to choose the right metadata and be transparent about it.
There were two things that came out of what you were saying just a second ago. One of them was about bias, and you sort of touched on it before I got a chance to, which is brilliant. Not all bias is bad. So again, if you're looking at someone who's, one gender and younger versus another gender and older, it's not the same conversation, and there needs to be some sort of selection in there. And a lot of people would say, I mean, technically that's a bias. So, but that's a good thing because it means that people are, getting the right information. So that's a great point. And I'm glad you brought that out, because bias is almost always talked about in a negative way, when actually there are many positives for certain biases. And this is where it gets super, super tricky, right? Like, who decides what's a good bias and who decides what's a bad bias? And I think depending on cultures and whatever, things in the West, we might think one thing, in China, they might think something different. And, in South America, they might think something different. So we have to be careful about assigning values to bias, whether it's good bias or bad bias. So I think that was a great point.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's not about being good or bad bias or other sort of bias. It is simply that there is that a data set is characterized in various ways. That certain value, a data set with certain values for these characteristics will cause certain behavior in the models that will be different depending on the training data that is used to train it and evaluate and used to evaluate it as well. It's like, what do you want to do, basically? Yeah, as a machine learning engineer, our task is to build models of the world so that we can automate the analysis of the world. So we take observations of the world and we try to capture the structure and variance within the world, within our model, so that when we then try to predict things, we get an answer which is accurate to a certain extent. And yes, sometimes the more accurate your model is, the more business efficiencies you can create, etc. But really, it's still about exploring like what the world is. And if the model is not accurate, that means your model is inaccurate and you haven't captured what it is about the world, and that just throws into question the observations and of the world that you've made, the way you've observed the world, the structure of the model, the variances that you've allowed the model to capture and encompass. It throws all those things into question, and that's the really cool thing about AI. It's not, for me, I think it's not that we've made the world a bit more efficient. It's that we've actually understood the world a bit better. That sort of starts getting into ideas of creativity as well, I think.
And we don't always like what we find. So I'm conscious of time. So sorry, I'm going to jump in here a little bit. I'm conscious of time. So, and again, thank you for spending so much time with me today. Just going back quickly to one of the things that you said earlier, you brought up regulation, and I assume there's some regulation around sort of mental health and interacting with people online and that kind of thing. Is that something that's in place, or is that something you think that's going to be developed with the regulation around AI in a general sense?
Is regulation around AI in a way at the moment? People are definitely starting to talk about it. As you might expect, the people in America are a bit more cavalier and the people in Europe are a bit more fussy, and the UK is somewhere in the middle. There is a difference between regulations, standards, and guidelines, and they're all evolving at the moment. And yes, I hope that we will be leading those conversations, helping to lead those conversations. And I don't think there is anything specific to mental health care, but there is a lot of regulation around medical devices, and a chatbot providing health. Any software, AI or otherwise, that is providing judgments, opinions, diagnoses, different sorts of levels of severity are regulated in different ways. But yes, at CamAI, we've been trained in how to build software which is medical device class 2A compliant, for example. So those areas are are more developed. Those areas of industry are more developed. So the regulations for AI in general are not as developed as the ones for medical devices because they've been on it for a bit longer.
Right. So is that where you guys sort of sit at the minute, or tools like yours anyway? If anyone that was doing this sort of thing that would fit under the kind of the medical devices kind of rules and regulations at the minute until or unless something specific to AI becomes available.
Yes. Well, the AI regulations are a part of it. Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought about that, but that's probably a great way to address it. And I wonder if that's what, extrapolating out to other industries, I wonder if that's what might happen eventually, is that, almost every industry has its own internal, sort of standards and guidelines that practitioners of that particular thing need to abide by. And I wonder if the AI regulations are just going to actually roll into those rules and regulations that are already there. Because I think at the end of the day, at least for me anyway, I think, we have to think about AI as a person. It's not a person, but we kind of have to think about it that way. So if it's behaving and acting and it's talking to people and it's saying things, then it needs to behave in the kind of social way, and it needs to, stick within the same rules that any professional in that field or any person in that area would need to abide by. So maybe that's the first step, is to just say, okay, well, the first thing to regulating AI is that it has to act as if it's a professional in that field, and it has to, sit within those sort of guidelines.
Yes, I think is the general gist of my response. But I just wanted to pick up on that idea of thinking about an AI as a person. It's not, and we shouldn't. And one little example, like if you left the gas on in your house and you went out and you came back and your house had burnt down, like your house has not taken over the world and started destroying your life. You left the gas on, that was your fault. I think the point is, there's no magic, in AI. It's just statistics, and data, and information. The AI, the algorithms are not dangerous. It's the humans who don't know how far to go that is the dangerous. This is the dangerous element. Yeah, and when it comes to to building AI services like what we're doing at Cam AI, I don't like to think about us building a robot or a machine that you're talking to, because although we were talking at the very beginning about how it's good to provide an automated service, those words were very carefully chosen. It was not, it's a good idea to provide a robot or a machine. What I really think of us as doing is building a telephone, basically, a telephone line. It's a channel of communication between the person, the user, the client, and the people who have provided the training data. So another thing about being a responsible AI company is the authenticity that we are able to be transparent about and are being transparent about. So we haven't just made up a whole load of conversations. We're getting really highly qualified, talented therapists as part of their day-to-day job to have chats with genuine people who genuinely want to have therapy. And we do this a lot of times. We record the conversations and transcribe them and feed them into the algorithms, having anonymized it, etc. The data we have is so valuable because it is so real and genuine and authentic. And those people, those therapists and those clients who are volunteering their words are part of this community, and it's them who you as a client are talking to. Yes, asynchronously, but actually the cleverness of the AI is to create that smart channel that somehow does effectively summarize and put into contact the people who are contributing to the data set and the people who are consuming the predictions that are based on the models that are trained on the data set. And so you can actually get a feeling of empathy even, because because we're being transparent about it, you can almost, you don't know who, but you know the sort of person that you're talking to asynchronously, but empathetically. So it's a channel of communication. We're trying to channel humanity through this channel. You're not talking to a robot. You're being put in contact with people who are empathetically generating data.
That's a great way to summarize that. And I think that, again, sort of, just from some of the conversations that I've had with people, talking about, that you were coming on, I think that's a really interesting way to say it and to express it. And I hadn't really thought about that. So you've given me some ammunition to go back to people and have more of a conversation, really. And I think that's a really interesting point. And I'll definitely make that into a clip and put that out, because I think it's really interesting for people to understand that it's not just because the interface is an artificial intelligence interface that someone's talking to. It's not that thing is just making stuff up. It's actually using conversations from real therapists, and that's what it's pulling out. So it's actually pulling out the information from real conversations and real people. It's not just making it up. And I think that's that little wrinkle that kind of comes into AI a lot that I think people forget is yes, it's a machine, and yes, it's, it randomly makes conversation. But most of the stuff that it's been trained on was actually written by real people. And we kind of forget that there are real people behind this as well. So, and that's how the empathy can come across. And so that's a great point. Yeah. I really like the way you express that. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah. But also to take that further, that's not enough. You can train a machine to not make stuff up itself, but sort of reproduce what other people have said already. But if that's only what it does, then you get the sort of models like ChatGPT that are these, like we talked about before, like these stochastic parrots.
Yeah.
Stochastic means a randomness that can be statistically analyzed. But basically they're just parroting in a sort of random way what has been said before. Yes, it has all been said before, but that doesn't mean you should say it again, and certainly not necessarily in the sort of statistically likely combinations that have been said in the past. And the problem with just using large language models is that there is no axiomatic reasoning behind what is being generated. So that, like, the very funny example is sort of this is, if you ask ChatGPT, if you say to it, have you heard this? If it takes 3 hours for 3 towels to dry on the line, how long does it take for 9 towels to dry on the line?
I haven't heard that one, no.
And it'll say 9, because whenever anyone has said, if it takes this to do this, and how long does it take this to do this in the past, and then it uses the linear relationship. But that's obviously not the case, because we understand what lines are, how they interact with wind, and how you can place items on things, and all of these connections that we have in our brain as humans because of the experience of the world, or this ontology of the world that we have built up, these axioms like you can put things on things, like the fact we understand that sort of relationship it is crucial to being able to generate a good response in that situation. There's this theory about communication where what you need to communicate is examples and axioms. So, if you're just like face to face with a caveman, you can say like, this is a rock. Okay, like that's an example of rock. You just have to accept that is a rock. But then I can, if I tell you that if you put a whole load of rocks together, you get a monument. Like if we introduce the concept of putting things together, then I can define this new thing, which is a monument, in terms of this thing that you have to accept, which is a rock, and this axiom of putting things together. And now we know not only about rocks, but monuments. Like those
putting things together
are fundamental to communication. And at the moment, ChatGPT is just doing one of them in a way that is relatable to us. You could argue that it does have axioms because it does have activation functions within the neurons of the network. But that's not an axiom that we can relate to in any way. And so that's why, for us at Cam AI, we have structured information like client history, which we combine with the more stochastic prediction of user intents, of mental state of the client. So we try to combine the structured and unstructured ways of doing things, which has been, it's the holy grail of AI to have that balance between the structure of the model and the variation that structure supports. If you can find that beautiful thing, then you've captured a model, and then you've captured the world in your model. And so it's an art as well, I think. And just in terms of, this is kind of like a creativity podcast. The one thing I wanted to say actually is, people think that AI is replacing creativity, right? That is a phrase that's out there. And my response to that is, where do you think the AI came from in the first place? Not only from the training data, but a whole load of very creative and very artistic engineers, because writing code is an art. There's a beauty and elegance to the maths and the algorithms within there, as well as how you write the code in a nice, neat way. So engineers are very creative artists, and their creativity has given rise to AI, and AI is another expression of creativity, and it's not a replacement of creativity. It's another way of being creative, and I think that's a great thing. And as you know, we're talking about how to model the world with yeah, we know how we're talking about modeling the world. Well, what is art other than that exploration of the difference between being born and being made, right? The model and the real world, that the exploration of that is art, and that is AI. So I think it's all very, very cool.
Yeah, it's very closely linked. And the other thing is I always point out, and a lot of people point out, is that AI learns the same way humans learn. Right? It learns from copying. It learns from seeing something. We can't draw a cat if we've never seen one. Right? If you took someone who literally had never seen a cat and said, draw a cat, they wouldn't know what that meant. They wouldn't even know what the word cat means. So they have to see at least one example of a cat to then be able to try and formulate what that looks like. And that's how humans learn. It's just, I think, because humans are out in the world, and we're constantly taking data from all sources, from vision, from sound, from words, from everywhere, and we're watching interactions exactly like you said. People are taking rocks and they're making them into things, and we go, oh, okay, so you can do that with a rock. Okay, I didn't know that. And then over time, and years and years and years and years, you get better at it. And I think where AI learns in exactly the same way. So, but it only learns on the data it's given. So yeah, it may not understand, putting the towels on the line example. It doesn't understand that because it's never put towels on a line. But at some point, if maybe it's encompassed in a robot, and a robot goes and puts towels on a line, and then the robot goes out and puts 9 towels on the line and realizes, oh, they're all dry in an hour, then just like a human, it's going to then understand that concept. So it's just like a small child, I think, at the minute, really. And, depending on how much we work with it and how much we allow it to sort of get out and get access to more information and that sort of thing, then that will depend on how quickly it actually grows into something that maybe is more like a human at some point, that has that has the ability to to make those connections that it doesn't at the moment.
If we can work out how to build that holy grail model that can somehow represent and capture this balance between structure and variation, but that is a very, 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 very big task that we don't even understand what the task is, because we are born, not made.
Yeah, exactly. And my prediction is that AI will build it. We won't even build it because we don't know how to build it, but it'll figure out how to do it, and we'll have no idea how it did it, but it'll work.
No, it's fine. You can just look at the code.
Yeah. Well, not always. I'm sure.
And if you're allowed to, if you've authenticated yourself. Yeah.
But I'm sure have been some examples already in the past. I don't know if it was Google or Facebook, but one of them built a system, and then the system started building and adding to itself. And then they literally couldn't figure out any of it. None of it made any sense. Even if you looked at it, no one could decipher what it was actually doing. And they ended up turning it off because they're like, literally, we can't understand anything that it's done. I'm not actually making that up off the top of my head. I will try and put that in the show notes, and I'll send you an email afterwards with a link to it. I have a couple questions I like to usually ask at the end of the podcast. Yeah. You may have come across those yet. So the first one I usually like to ask people is, in your mind, do you think AI is male or female?
Is AI male or female? It is neither, nor is it non-binary. It is not something you can assign a gender to, a gender to. It is something you can assign an agenda to. If AI is the automated prediction of information and adaptation of processes in order to optimize a goal, it's not a person.
So it's something else entirely.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And when you have an AI assistant, which you probably will in the not too distant future, what would you name it? If you could name it, what would you name it?
Good question. The Microsoft Paperclip.
No, Clippy. No more Clippy.
Would I name it? I would name it.
The hardest question of the interview.
It is. I'm trying not to give like a silly answer. I just want to try and give some like sort of meaningful answer that has, I think, some like degree of romanticism on. I think it's something that tries to capture something that tries to capture that holy grail of balance of structure and variance. I think. I don't know what that is though, or maybe something like along the lines of Greek myths, like don't fly too close to the sun or something like that.
Yeah, some sort of classical name. Okay, that's fine. It's not meant to be a trick question, but a lot of people struggle because they're not really sure.
Yeah, I think so. It's something that really captures what AI is, I guess, which is this exploration of humanity. Yes, just don't leave the gas on.
So where can people go if they want to participate and help you in the project?
Yes, okay, great. So if you want to be, one of those people in the community who's helping others, put your words out there to help others, we are looking for volunteers to participate in the research that we're doing. Specifically, at the moment, people from the ages of 18 to 25. And the easiest way to do us is to do that is to follow us somehow, I guess. So, we are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. We have a website. Do you want me to say the URL of the website?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. I mean, if people can go to the website and register to be part of it or anything like that, yeah, go for it. It's fine. It's just, just share the information.
Cool. If you go to Cam AI on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, we're just Cam AI, CAMAI. Then you'll find posts with buttons to click that say sign up. And if you go to our website is cam-ai.co.uk or cam-ai.chat /free-therapy. Either of those will work, and just follow the links and buttons and sign up. And what you're signing up to is to volunteer to have a couple of CBT-based therapy sessions with one of these amazing professional accredited therapists that we're working with, which are free when they usually cost a lot of money.
Excellent.
If you're interested in that, then if you would find that helpful, then please get in touch, because the reason that we are doing this at CamAI is to save lives and to help people. So if we can help you, then please get in touch.
Thank you very much. I will put all the links, all the relevant links to all the social profiles, the website, all that sort of stuff in the show notes and everything for people. So if anybody wants to go to it, particularly, if you're an adolescent or a young adult and you have some issues, or, you want to participate and you want to help this program, I'll share all the links so everybody has access to it. And the whole transcript and everything will also be on our website. So if anybody wants to go back to it later, they can pull stuff out from there. And I think that's it for today. So Simon, thank you very much. It's been a really interesting conversation. And I think what you guys are doing is amazing. And do you know what? If you help one person, not go down the, sort of taking their own life route, then everything you're doing is worth it. So from that standpoint, I think it's really admirable, and I wish you guys the best of luck. So, and thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your wishes, and thank you for having me on.
Cheers. All right, I'll speak to you soon.
The Creatives with AI podcast, the spiritual home of creatives curious about AI and its role in their future.